Welcome to episode 68. Wow, 68 weeks of these. Wow. We're calling this Just in Time. Why Just in Time training is bad for business? Controversial topic, possibly. Good debate, possibly. I'll tell you how it all started here in a minute. Want to thank Jasper Engines and Transmissions. When a car's engine or transmission fails, it's not the end of the road. A remanufactured drivetrain product from Jasper Engines and Transmissions will give your customer's car a new lease on life. Thank Jasper so much for support of the Town Hall Academy. I want to welcome our great team here. Donnie Seifer, Executive Officer of NASTAF and co-owner of Seifer Automotive. Hey, Donnie.
Good morning. I guess it's not morning where we're at anymore. Is it good? Happy lunch.
Yeah, you got a time zone shift. Chris Chesney, Senior Director of Customer Training at the CarQuest Institute and NASTAF board member. Hi, Chris.
Good morning.
Mark Saxenberg, Principal of Saxenberg Consulting Services and NASTAF Chairman. Wow. Mark, you're the founder and father of the Road to Great Technicians and a huge proponent of being service ready which is the opposite of just-in-time learning, I believe.
I think maybe I'll take exception to that a little.
That's okay. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. Thank you. Bill Haas is here with us from Haas Performance Training and Business Manager at NACAD. Hi, Bill.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Jeff Peavy, AM, the President of Automotive Management Institute. Hey, Jeff.
Hey. Good day, Con.
Now, if anyone wants to this is one of the biggest town halls I've ever done with this level, this group. And when Donnie and I were conversing about this, he just kept writing to me, you got to have Jeff on, you got to have Bill on, you got to have my brother from another mother, Chris Chesney on, and you got to have Mark on. And so I just said, yes. And if you said 8 more people, they would all be here. And what I love about this group is that there is, we have an eclectic mix of passionate automotive aftermarket trainers and people who really care. And I think we're not talking about stuff that doesn't need to be done. We're talking about important things on the Town Hall Academy and especially this show. So I'm in the studio at Vision with Donnie and this NASTAF panel. Chris, you were on that with Jill Saunders. And Donnie drops this little bomb about just-in-time training is bad for business, and I wrote it down, and I'm you just kind of going through your little thing, and I got through my notes, about a month later, and I said, Donnie, I wrote this down. Is this worthy of having a discussion about? And he said, sure it is. So I want to really have you lead this off. You have said that if you're not learning everything in the Bay, you're not making any money. What do you mean by that?
Sorry. Well, I think if you're trying to learn everything in the Bay, you're not making any money. Can anybody hear
Donnie?
I can hear Donnie.
You can hear Donnie? Okay.
Yes,
go ahead, Donnie.
I can.
Okay.
So my point there was that if you're waiting till the car shows up to learn everything, you're in trouble. And of course, my friend and mentor, actually, these are all my mentors here, but my friend and mentor, Mr. Saxenberg, will expand on that quite a bit. So I don't really want to go too far with that, but that was the whole idea, is that you can't learn at the last minute and expect to make any money in this business.
Got it. I understand. Mark, you have said we have to distinguish between just-in-time learning and just-in-time service support resources. Let's jump in.
You want to know what that means, huh?
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm a big proponent of service readiness, and some of you may have heard me speak on that subject over the years. But as we all know, cars are really complicated, and they're not getting less so. And there are just so many makes and models and permutations of models that it's impossible to know everything you need to know when a car rolls into the service bay. So while you need the fundamentals, and Donnie's absolutely right, that you can't expect to make any money when you're learning in the service bay, you also can't help but have to learn in the service bay because many of the problems that roll in your door you've never seen before. And therefore, I like to think of, just-in-time learning is something, it just has to happen. Like it or not, it's got to happen. You can do everything you possibly want to do to understand the fundamentals and still be challenged every day.
Chris, take a stab at just-in-time learn training.
I think from the standpoint of that Mark brings up, you can't know everything. You can't know every strategy or system iteration that even one manufacturer brings to the market. Use Toyota, for example, since Mark's on the call and I was a Toyota Master Tech. It's easy to think that a dealer tech can understand their models intimately and well enough to be able to approach them with just-in-time training, because they know how to access the information, they know how to work the tool, they know where to find the data and the information they need at a moment's notice. And that's true to a certain extent, but what we see in the aftermarket is a true lack of core competencies with respect to foundation skills, electronics, just the foundation physics and chemistry that need to be understood so that they can interpret the information that they're reading from the OEM just in time as you're working on the vehicle. So when we're talking about just-in-time training, I want to define it more clearly, and Mark has defined it as just-in-time training or just-in-time resources. You have to have those core skills to be able to interpret the resources in front of you so you can apply them appropriately. And the real critical nature of all of this comes from the standpoint of you can't afford as a shop owner to spend your customers' time learning about core competencies on their back. It's not fair to the consumer. It's not fair to the motorist. So understanding how to diagnose a data network system long before, no matter what level of CAN or LIN or any other protocol that we're talking about, needs to be well understood before you approach that vehicle, so that when you look the service information up for that vehicle, while the car's in the bay and you're learning the idiosyncrasies of that particular model, you're effective. Otherwise, you're learning what LIN stands for, and you're trying to figure out why you can't communicate to that network with the scan tool that you bought 10 years ago and you haven't updated in the meantime. Learning on the back of a consumer in that way is not effective.
Jeff, take a stab at it.
Well, actually, I've shared this with you probably more than once. The term, the buzz phrase, just in time, and I've mentioned this before, really comes from the manufacturing. That term comes from the manufacturing industry. But here's my, as an educator, I guess, and I'll use that term loosely when I describe myself. But I have a concern. It could easily, this phrase, just in time learning or just in time training, could be misinterpreted and picked up by our industry as, well, we don't go to training events anymore. We're participating in just in time learning. And I fear that could create this learning in the bay as we go kind of concept. I would stress that we need to almost always have a disclaimer anytime we use that's what it means. I always have a fear that anything we do, the industry often is looking for a way to say, oh, so we don't have to go educate ourselves anymore. I do believe that we need to consistently approach the need for real structured education. I think, Chris, you were the one that was talking about, those core principles and those things. You need to know those things so you can interpret that just-in-time information and act on it properly. So I have this fear that this phrase is liable to be picked up and used as an excuse for procrastinating on real foundational principle-based training.
And I want to go to Bill Haas now that we'll break the ice with all of you. Bill, what Jeff just said was so interesting. I'm sorry, what Chris, Mark, Donnie, and Jeff have all said now from a business coach's perspective. Are we wasting time in the bays doing JIT, and it's really affecting the profitability of the company? I mean, it's almost like it's okay to do this, but they don't realize how it's really hurting the economics of the business.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think people miss that from the standpoint of managing their business and managing their time and knowing what time is available and assigning the appropriate talent to the job. And I think we see that sometimes where we might take someone who doesn't have those core competencies or that knowledge base and put them in a position to do something because we think they can get the training on the job. And it's actually very frustrating for everybody. It's very frustrating for the technician himself, number one. It's very frustrating for the business. And most importantly, it's very frustrating for the customer because the customer is in a position of starting to feel like maybe I didn't bring my car to the right place because this individual working on my car is really struggling to understand what my car problem is. And now I'm getting frustrated because I don't know if the right person's working on my car and what that does to the repair process in terms of how long it's going to take and when I'll get my car back, and having confidence that when I do finally get my car back, if it's really going to be fixed, or should that car have gone to another individual who had the knowledge to really take care of that car. So from a business standpoint, yeah, I think it really is a big deal.
Chris, you were on the show once, and you mentioned the word triage. I think we were doing a Town Hall Academy. It has so stuck with me ever since you had mentioned that. And when Bill was saying, give it to the right guy, I remember your comments about triage, and maybe it's been maybe a few months. Bring that up again, and it may help crystallize some of this.
Well, I think that the term triage is something that we can learn from the medical industry. We always want to align ourselves with them and make fun of that lack of true alignment. But giving the vehicle to the right person with the right skill set, at least the right core skill set, so that they can apply that to the information you need to research during every job is critical. I go back to some of the statements I've made recently with respect to the amount of time we spend educating our young people entering this industry compared to what we did 40 years ago. We spend the same amount of time today educating young technicians to come into the workplace with an expectation that's the same as 40 years ago, that you'll know everything you need to know to work on the vehicles that come into your bay. The problem is that as we try to keep up with that technology, we're falling further and further behind with those core skills because we don't have enough physical time in the classroom or in the lab to be able to transfer the knowledge that we need to give those young people to be able to be effective on today's technology. So you can't expect a young technician without those core skills and those great research skills, which are only gained through experience and application and making mistakes, but learning from each of those instances. It only takes time. So triage gives us the ability to quickly identify where that vehicle should go in the bay and who should work on it, so that we put the right level of experience on that problem so that the consumer, the motorist, is taken care of, but more importantly, so the shop owner can reap a benefit or make a profit as a businessman. Anything short of that is just throwing it to folly.
Donnie, Chris just said research skills, core skills. You've all mentioned core skills. Donnie, give me a view of what the shop needs to do today to manage all of that for their team. We cannot live in JIT. We can live in some of it, I believe you're all saying, but we can't live in it in a universal way. So how do we manage research skills? How do we train for that? How do we be sure that the resumes are built so that the core skills are being learned?
So that's kind of the tricky part, right? Teaching teaching technicians how to actually find information. Where do they need to look? How do they need to do that? I mean, I would say that half the people on this, maybe all of the people on this current panel, have dealt with that for years. How do we show a tech how to do it? Bill and I have both gone out and done training specifically on how do you find information. And my experience is that a technician who knows how to find information can get away with a standard core set and look like a rocket scientist. And a really good tech who doesn't know how to do this stuff is just lost a lot of time. And that's unfortunate. I know some technicians who are just not computer web browser savvy, don't know how to use their service information to its advantage. And simple things like, if I can't find a piece of information in the third party or the OE software, how about just using search? And those sorts of things just amaze me that we still are contending with that.
I want to sit back and just let you guys have a conversation. I don't want to have to, lead this. Any comments on what Donnie just said?
Well, what Donnie is pointing out here is it's core skill. And Carm, when you pose this question to Donnie, essentially you're getting at one of the things that we're trying to hit with the Road to Great Technicians, which is, how do you know that somebody you hire has the fundamental skills in the area that you want to put them to work doing? And one of the most fundamental skills is how to use service information. And today, service information is not pulling a book off a shelf. It's going to a computer somewhere and typically logging into a website and knowing how to navigate the service support resources. And in many cases, it's not just researching the information for the task at hand. It's also using a scan tool that oftentimes is connected to that same computer. So if you don't have that fundamental skill, then you probably ought to find another trade, because that will increasingly become the most fundamental skill that any technician needs. But I'd like to kind of transition for a moment to just-in-time training, because I spent a very large part of my career developing service support systems, including web-based service informations and essentially PC-based scan tools. And having come out of this industry, fixing cars at the beginning of my career, I know what a challenge it is to get the right information at the right time. And nowadays, what a challenge it is to get all of the different disparate pieces of information that you need all queued up at the same time. And one of the things that we tried to do at Toyota years ago was to take a lot of the navigation to all of these different resources and build it into the tool, build it into the service information system. So, as an example, if you need to diagnose a diagnostic trouble code and it shows up on your scan tool, the idea was to queue up the service information associated with that DTC and any other information that you might need to troubleshoot that DTC. So as a user, all you got to do is, click a link, you got the service information, click a link, you got a training video, click a link, you've got the whole training course. And if you take just-in-time training to a logical conclusion, in my mind, one of the things you get is a how-to video. It's a minute or two long, because you can't have done every task that you have to do for every car that rolls in the door. And if you're getting repeat tasks over and over again, you're lucky if you're a diagnostician. So just imagine
You're describing a support tool to me.
What kind of tool?
Support tool.
Yeah, exactly. This is a service support resource. Imagine you're a collision repair shop and you're getting that Lexus SC SC430 convertible top that you've got to align and adjust, and you've never done it before. And you just got done doing all this body work on the car, and the first time you operate the thing, you damage the top because you didn't adjust it right. What if you could queue up the information that you need to adjust it properly and kind of follow that as you go through your repair? That's the just-in-time training that I think we do need. I think that the industry needs to move in a direction of queuing up resources for technicians to make it easy to get to them when they need them.
Carm, I think that's a perfect explanation of what just-in-time training was meant to be.
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect example of the intent of it. I think, but Jeff pointed out earlier that our communication to the field and to the aftermarket has been weak with respect to, and my lights went off because I'm in a motion detection section of the building here, so I got to lean around and throw my shoulder out of joint to get it to turn back on. We as an industry have done a poor job of explaining what that means to the industry. And so we need to do a better job of that. And so it dawns on me that, and Toyota is a perfect example because we're in the middle of writing a new Toyota class for CTI. And at STX, WorldPAC Supplier Training Expo 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, we delivered some new Toyota and Honda training. And all of our manufacturers training that we're really focused on is really focused on how to leverage the support tools like TechStream and its integration with TIS. And for example, if you're working on a data network on a Toyota and you need a sample waveform to queue up so that you know what you're seeing on your picoscope is accurate, it's all integrated into TIS. But does every technician know that? And so the research skills need to be taught, but it needs to be taught in context with the tool that you're using. So you get into situations where I've got some great foundation skills. I understand electronics intimately. I understand data networks to the point where I'm very productive. But now Toyota has thrown a new strategy in, and they've served up content to me that I may not know exists. So I don't even know to go look for it. So part of the challenge for training providers like CTI and WTI is to find those resources and expose them to the aftermarket so that those that have the foundation skills can apply them quickly, just in time at the fender of the car, in the way that Mark and his team intended it to be.
I think the other thing that I'd like to touch on from Mark's example about the convertible top is the training that's really necessary is for the technician to know that they shouldn't be attempting to do that convertible top without knowledge of the tools and the resources that are required. Because what happens is, by not knowing enough about the convertible top system at all, at a very rudimentary level, we're going to damage something, and we're going to incur some cost. We're going to incur some additional downtime. We're not going to be able to deliver that car to the customer when we expect to be. So it's not that the just-in-time training would be that they know how to do the convertible top. The more important piece is that they know not to do anything with the convertible top till they have the resources and the tooling available to have that knowledge that really becomes that resource that we're talking about. That's what I see as the real opportunity to improve the business process.
And that would be service readiness.
Yeah, that's
correct.
A good point. That they're educated enough to know what they don't know. and that they need to go
Yes.
get that information at that time. Yeah.
And I think that applies to whether it's convertible tops or fuel systems or transmissions. You can apply that across the board.
This is where a well-run shop, you have a schedule, you know what to expect. And so when you see that car is coming in, I've never done that before. For me, the just-in-time piece is when I'm not under that gun to get something done, I can look at it, at night, log into to a site. If I need to go to an OE site I'm not familiar with, spend a little time on it. And then when I show up at the shop, I've already got a pretty good handle on what's going to happen and what to expect. And I've seen all the bulletins and all the messages. And now I can actually do something where, I'm not feeling like I'm under pressure to solve a problem in a way that maybe you could never do the second time.
So you're doing some almost in-time training.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think there's another piece to that that's critically important, and that's that communication. It's the customer calls, the car's on the schedule, and what happens in a lot of cases is the customer shows up with the car, and then it gets assigned to the tech, and the tech goes, haven't seen this before, this is brand new. That communication needs to happen beforehand, where the advisor's talking to the team of technicians saying, hey, I've got something new coming in here, on Thursday or Friday. Let's talk about this. How are we going to be prepared for this car with this system coming in? That's something that's not happening in shops that really needs to happen.
Hold that thought, everyone. Jasper has over 2,000 associates, 3 manufacturing facilities, 2 distribution centers, and 45 branch offices all over the country. They're all working to produce, transport, and deliver the perfect product. And that's what they do best. Keep customers happy so you can keep your customers happy. Thank you, Jasper, for supporting the Town Hall Academy. I wrote down the word anticipation as you were just finishing, Bill, and it's almost like it needs to be part of the strategy in the company. Being able to lean over your skis and see down the road and realize where those challenges can come inside the shop that are going to be labor, your productivity, your efficiency, your promised time to your customers, and attempt to create an almost just-in-time philosophy in anticipating the workload or the challenge.
Yes.
Wow, I delivered that punchline. It's great. All right, we're done. You guys can go home now.
Well said.
So is it guys, you've almost defined exactly where the whole point of this is, and what I'd like to do is to be sure, in the remaining time that we have, we need to put a bow on this, and I want people to listen to this and say, these are the things that I have to do to become better in all regards when it comes to training. There's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and it's the holistic approach. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, this discussion reminded me of a presentation I used to do years ago with a suitcase on a stage, and I would have it on a stand where the audience couldn't see the contents of the suitcase, and I would open it and put a $20 bill or $50 bill in it, and then I would invite someone in the audience, generally a technician, to come up. And we made light of this, but it was an oversimplification of a really important point, and that was, you feel confident that you can open the suitcase and remove the $20 or $50 bill, and if you can, go ahead. And then right before they do that, I would stop them, and I would tell them, though you may feel confident, are you confident of everything that's in that suitcase? Do you feel confident you know everything you need to do to R&R the $20 bill out of the suitcase? And so what they didn't know was there was a 6-foot diamondback rattlesnake in that suitcase. Not a real one, but one that made a TSA agent make a well, that's for another story. But what did happen was I had actually up on screen, just to make a point, is I had a prepared presentation that was a class on how the proper procedure of removing the $20 out of that suitcase. And in there, it talked about some of the things that might exist in there, one being a 6-foot diamondback rattlesnake, and that it itself, because it wasn't real, couldn't hurt you. It could cause you to hurt yourself. And so, the point is that there's almost a need, as I said a while ago, to know what you don't know. At least, the day of the confident technician, one would swagger, that thinks they can walk in and fix everything and figure everything out, is gone. And they need to understand there's just some things they can't tear into until they understand what they're doing. And I think that really applies. And it just made me think of that old presentation. I had so much fun with that.
I think as well, Carm, that one of the things that all of this points to is a lack of process in most shops. You go to the OE dealer and there's more process there because they're focused on one methodology if they're a one single make. So Toyota has their processes, they have their tool, the tool drives that process with respect to the technician and the way it's integrated with TIS and other tools. But in the aftermarket, and Bill can attest to this, it's throw everything out the door. You walk in as a tech, your onboarding is, there's your bay, there's where you park your tools, there's where you go get a ticket, good luck. And so to use just-in-time training and the technology resources and service support resources that are being provided to the aftermarket by the OEMs and outside resources in the aftermarket, the only way we can do that is to implement process in our shops to take advantage of it. And the one person we haven't talked about yet is the service advisor, who has to fully understand what this is all about, what the processes are, and better yet, understand the capabilities of every one of his production agents in the back to be able to pull off that work. So that brings triage back up. If we aren't able to triage or point that vehicle to the right person, and triage is nothing new, even in the automotive sector. When I worked for Burt Toyota back in the late 70s, early 80s in Denver, Colorado, Norm Barr was, I hope he's still alive. He was one of my favorite people. He was the dispatcher. He was spectacular at triaging the job just based on the repair order and putting it in the hands of the right person. Now, I complained because I got some jobs that I had never seen before, but I was the guy that would solve the problems. But that's what made that shop productive. We need to implement that in all shops today in a way that allows a service advisor who comes off the street after flipping burgers or selling bread or potato chips and is now asked to sell service, give them the skill set to understand who to give the job to and how to set those expectations with the customer with respect to the amount of time it takes because of the research that needs to go on and the just-in-time training that needs to be accessed so that we can do that job right the first time.
Well, since Chris brought up the service advisor, I mean, if you think about it, there's probably not any other position in our industry that you could apply just-in-time training to more than the service advisor. Because how many often do we hear the story about someone who was just there to help, maybe somebody that did office work and started answering the phone because the phone was ringing, and without any training, anybody giving them any guidance or mentoring or anything, they just developed into someone. There's your perfect example of just-in-time training. That's happening on the service counter every day in shops across America.
Donnie, what kind of training for service advisors, and maybe all of you can answer this, that's going on with core fundamentals? Are we just doing sales skills, or are we working on core fundamentals?
Well, it's funny you say that, because when we wrote the ASE service consultant test, I was one of only two on the whole panel that actually had a technical background. And I would write these questions, and they say, well, that's too hard. And they were what I thought were pretty simple. Do you understand how a ball joint functions? Do you understand how brakes slow vehicles down? Those sorts of things. And they said, well, why does a service advisor need to know that? All they need to know is how to sell, to run the shop. That was my answer. So that's, I think, one of the big challenges is getting that kind of training And a lot of the programs, the VOTEC programs, are great for a potential service advisor. Run through the primary or part of the program the first couple of years, and you've got some really solid skills. You've taken a few things apart. You know how they work. Now apply the soft skills to that, and you've got a lethal service advisor.
A question came in on the Zoom platform. If you had to guess, gentlemen, what percentage of shops are service ready for the vehicles that they service?
Oh, I would say, as a teacher, and Chris can probably jump in on that too, that's a very low number. I'm involved in a couple of groups where shop owners all talk to each other, and the number of tools that, just if we're talking tools that are core necessities to work on a brand that people are trying to borrow, and they don't know that because clearly they haven't performed the task. Okay, that's fair, but they don't know that because they haven't even looked before they agreed to take the car on. That number's scary high.
Gary Key says 10%.
Carm, I would agree. If you consider the number of shops that don't have an OE scan tool, that don't go to training. We see the same people in the classroom all the time. We see the same people at the conferences all the time. That number is sub 10% easily. But if you define service readiness the way Mark has defined it in the past, and that is being prepared to service a vehicle before it shows up at your bay, I would say that number is below 5%. Now, I'm excluding the OEM dealers because they're challenged with it on a daily basis. They're laser focused on it, but their window of need is much narrower than a general service repair facility. So if you take into account the import specialists, they're probably more service ready than a general repair shop. But would you ever be service ready to that definition? Probably not. But if you had core skills, you can be ready to learn just in time when those vehicles show up. And that's really the goal.
Fascinating what you just said, and I ask this question a lot to a lot of panels and a lot of friends in the industry about specialization. We see the Euro shops, the Asian shops, and what's going on with the general repair shop, and how big do you have to get to have specialists? But that would, a platform specialist technician would go a long way to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm. I think to the point where in the future we're going to be disciplined technicians. We're going to be not a Ford or a GM or a Toyota specialist. We'll be a data network specialist. We'll be an electrified vehicle specialist. We'll be a three-phased AC motor generator specialist. Those types of disciplines are going to be really foundational to the future of the industry.
Stacy Diaz said, I have been a service advisor for over 30 years. This came in from the Zoom platform, and do not work on cars. It should not be a requirement to work on cars. I don't disagree, but
I don't think anybody suggests it be a requirement, but I think awareness is critically important.
Mm-hmm. I'll use just a use case internally, Carm, and I don't want to turn this into a commercial, but we have tens of thousands of shop owners out there using Virtual Vehicle, which is an animation tool to help communicate with the customer. And one of the biggest values that shops see from that is not the communication with a customer, it's the enabling of the service advisor with understanding the technology they're trying to sell or the services that they're trying to sell through simple videos or narrations of an animated video. And so she's right. You don't need to be a tech to sell service, but it helps when you are saying the right things in context with what you're trying to offer your customer.
I had a great discussion with the Trained by Tech guys at Vision, and that episode released today. It is so worth everyone's listen. and we were really digging into the level of professionalism in the industry. And these guys says, well, and it was Fonzel who one day said, you'll really know if there's a professional technician because he takes his work home and he studies and he does everything that he possibly can. And these guys were saying they would take a challenge home at night and work through their network at 2:00 in the morning, maybe possibly figure it out. And they were so deep in it, Donnie, it goes to your whole idea of, almost, pulling yourself forward 8 hours before you jump into the job and immerse yourself into the problem or into the situation. And the whole point of this group was we're professionals. We know it. We act it every day. This is what we do. And it was refreshing to hear from that semi-young group of guys who had one heck of a great episode for us. I'm loving where this went, and I would love we've got some other stuff going on here, and it may not be we may not have enough time to get to all the good things that are going on. I wrote down a bunch of things that I would almost like to summarize and either have you take exception with this or not. I wrote down fundamentals and core skills. I wrote down research. I wrote down resume building. I wrote down service support tools, Mark. I wrote down processes and triage and the service advisor's engagement and understanding our own capabilities of our team and anticipation, almost being the visionary of the workload for the shop. Queuing up resources. God, that's a great soundbite right there. That is just, it gives you a chance to really describe some really big things. And I wrote this word called anticipation down. And that was one of my, one of the things that I was thinking about as you guys were talking about how are we going to be able to work on that next challenge and anticipating it. And how many times we think about things the day before we're about ready to do something, and then when we start doing it, we feel so much more in the zone because we've had a chance to work the gray cells. Ever happened to you, Donnie?
Well, then you hit on one of the key things you've got to think about, that it's not really just in time, but it is just in time. And is my scan tool updated? Do I already have the subscription set up that I'm going to need? When was the last time I dusted off that tool and charged it up? Because I haven't used that recently. And the amount of time you can burn, my guys will come up and say, I need whatever OE tool, and it needs a huge update. And so from my point of view, if I'm there and I'm watching the schedule, that's my fault for not doing it because I'm tool support. And I should have had that thing all ready to roll for them when they got in there and had the conversation about, well, there's this new update and things are going to be different. And when you connect to the VCI, that's going to be different. And so it's nice to have somebody in the shop that's taking that role. And maybe to Bill's point earlier, that's also the person who can interface with the advisor and help with some of this stuff. So we had an advisor for a time that did not understand what our techs could and could not do, and would throw things at a tech that was completely out of their wheelhouse. And then you had to scramble all morning, shuffling around who was doing triage and is this a good learning opportunity, or are we just wasting time? And so what a mess when you've got an advisor, a manager like we currently have, who just knows everybody's skills inside and out. You don't have that scheduling mess anymore.
I got it. Thank you so much for that, Donnie. At Jasper Engines and Transmissions, quality and customer service is their number one goal. Their associates take pride in their work, and it shows in the quality drivetrain products they produce, and their quality and customer service has kept them growing for 76 years. Thank you, Jasper. This was interesting. What a great panel. I thank you so much for investing some time with us to pay it forward for the industry. I want to go around the room and give each of you a chance to put a bow tie around this discussion. I think we went into some great ways. There was a lot of fabulous discussion both on Facebook as Patrick Egan was sending me some of the Facebook stuff and what really happened up on Zoom. It's great to have an audience that's engaged in in our situation. So I'll just go. I'm sorry, you can't. I'm sure your screens don't look the same as mine. So I'll pick each of you and put a bow tie around this, Jeff.
Well, for me, and some of the experiences that I've had and some of the research I've been involved with, this really does speak to a greater issue around the culture of the business. And you guys know I talk quite a bit about learning culture, which is really simple. It is out loud and talking about an expectation to learn, and that it's something that's ongoing, it's expected, and everyone in the business expects it, as well as the sharing of knowledge is expected. And those are two really simple things, but you would be surprised how many times that doesn't happen. And so whether it's just in time or whether it is just a general culture of learning makes a big difference. The shops that are embracing that and taking the time to understand it are the ones that are being really successful.
Hey, it's your first time on an academy.
Yeah, it is.
Thanks for being here.
Enjoyed hanging out.
Can I do a commercial?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So Jeff has approved 6 of the Town Hall Academy podcasts for AMI elective credit. And we just put them up on the website a few weeks ago. And so if you're learning to continue your accreditation, you need 6 credit hours a year now to keep it up. And or you're going for your all the different accreditations that AMI offers, we'll start putting more Town Hall Academy episodes up there for elective credit. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And who knows, maybe this one will be there.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something to learn here. Great. Bill Haas.
Well, I think for me, I think the takeaway for people should be that this has to be ingrained in your business, and it has to be about your process. And the process has to manage all of this to meet the customer's expectations. So starting from, are we taking in the right cars? Are we, do we have the talent, the tools, equipment, and resources to be able to work on that particular vehicle? And then how do we manage that entire process to deliver something that the customer will be satisfied? We, at a minimum, meet their expectations, hopefully exceed their expectations. But just start looking at your process. Does taking these cars in and the people that we have to do the work, does it turn into sort of a catastrophe every day and we're spending all day putting out these little fires that are popping up? That's process. And so if we can start to find those points of pain and address those points of pain, the process will take over. It's going to be better for everybody. Technicians will be happier. That goes to our culture. People want to be part of a happy place, right? The business will function much better up front. People won't be nagging at each other or, throwing daggers at each other. And the business becomes profitable. And the customers go out and talk about what a great experience they had because I took it to a place that was capable of doing what needed to be done as it should be. It's about process. Figure out the process and implement process in your business that makes all of this come together.
Good advice, Bill. Thank you very much. Mark, thanks for coming on. You're a first timer with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I got a couple of things that I'd like to wrap this up with. And the first is, I think that any professional shop needs to aspire to be service ready. And we'll narrow that down to service ready on the things that you work on, the things that you spend the most time working on. And the first step in service readiness is having technicians on board who already have the fundamentals in the areas that they're expected to work. The other thing is I really think that the industry needs a model for technician development to ensure that when you identify somebody that you want to hire, that they have those core competencies, and that they've got the fundamentals in the areas that you're planning to hire them for, and that's what the Road to Great Technicians is all about.
Well, I got you here. Is there any news on the Road to Great Technicians at all that we should know about, guys?
Donnie?
When is there a time that we can get together and talk about that?
We are very close to being able to show you a framework that we are going to give to the industry to hang their training and their opinions on. It's close.
By the way, everyone, episode 312 was the NASTAF, the Road to Great Technicians podcast from Vision with Donnie, with Chris, and Jill Saunders. And you got to listen to that one. It was so good. And if you like what you heard today, that'll be your bookend, or that'll be the anchor for stuff to come. Chris, I'll let you have the last word.
Well, that's pretty scary, Carm. So, number one, appreciate the opportunity. First of all, just-in-time training really has a place in the industry if it's applied appropriately. So, as Bill alluded to, process is the name of the game. And the one thing that we do poorly in the aftermarket is onboarding or setting expectations for our people in the industry. So process is a part of that, but anybody that's new that comes into the front door and goes to work for the shop owners that are on the call or that listen to this need to have a process to onboard their people, to set expectations or set standards of performance for their people so that the resources that they're provided are used effectively and appropriately. They shouldn't be relying on a silver bullet database to repair vehicles. They shouldn't be relying on a resource of public opinion to guide them in their diagnostics. They should be relying on those resources with the experience and the education that is provided through foundation skills, through vocational education or ongoing training from organizations that this industry tends to support at a lower level than they should. Jeff said it well right at the beginning. The fear of those of us that talk about just-in-time training is don't make it just an excuse to not go to training because you can get everything you need right at your fingertips. You need to know the details of some of the things you've never seen before at your fingertips, but you need to have the understanding and the knowledge and the expertise to know when to apply them. And so as we're building out this Road to Great Technicians model, one of the things that, and I look at the screen, 4 of the 8 or 9 people or 10 people that are on the education team that are putting this together are on this call. So Bill and Mark and Donnie and myself, we're committed to making sure that we create a process that curriculum providers across the industry can hang their curriculum on. But at the end of the day, as Mark will put it, a technician that works for Joe's Garage that wants to go to work for Toyota or vice versa, those service managers can look at their training and say, that guy knows exactly what I need him to know to do the job that I'm hiring him for. And it doesn't matter where he got that education. So thanks for the opportunity, Carm.
Great wrap, Chris. Really great wrap. Chris Chesney, Donnie Cipher, Mark Saxenberg, Bill Haas, Jeff Peavy. Thumbs up, guys. Great job. Thanks.